Okay, let's look at development 9.44, number 4. And this is one very similar to what you've done in AutoCAD. And so I'm going to work through it here in Inventor uh, to show you kind of how it work there. And I've already done it and excuse me, just suppressed a lot of stuff. So I did my sketch on the XZ plane, just like it shows the top view there in the book. And I went ahead and drew it and dimensioned it and constrained it so that it's locked in place. And then if we look at our, well, not quite that side view, I created this work plane. It's an offset that's 28 millimeters up. And then I created this one, which is the top of it, which is 86 millimeters up. Okay, and then once you have your sketch drawn here, you can do a sketch on this work plane and project geometry of that edge, the right side edge of this thing. And I drew a, let's see, that'd be work plane 1. Let's see if I can look at it. Okay, so I projected the geometry up, which is the yellow line. And then I drew a, excuse me, a construction line, which you use your line command and hit that little button there to make it a construction line. And then I constrained it collinear on top of the projected geometry. Okay, I did the same thing for the top view. And what this enables me to do is it gives me 2 lines that I can create this work plane between. And for that option, I just did work plane 2 coplanar edges, and I selected those 2 construction lines, if you will, in the sketch. Okay, and that gives me the place where I can cut it off. So let me come over here and unsuppress these things. So I had my sketch down here, and I used the lofted flange edit feature. I chose, oh, before I did that, and let me back up. What I did up here on work plane 2 is I created a new sketch and projected geometry from the bottom up to the top. And then I can do the lofted flange. And as you can see there, I've sketch 1 on the bottom, sketch 2 on the top. Edit feature. Okay, and so I selected those 2 profiles for the top and the bottom. And I chose a press brake for my output, and I'm making my material thickness 0.5 millimeters since we're dealing in metric, and that's just okay for what we're dealing with right now. But you have to look at the offset directions, because if most of the times when you're creating a pattern, the dimensional size of the pattern is going to be the interior of the object. Okay, that's just kind of a given. But in our case, we're dealing with AutoCAD with 0 thickness, on our part. And if you print it on a piece of paper, it's not 0 thickness, but it's very close to it. And so I changed the offset direction on this one to be to the inside, because if I look very closely right here, you can see the extrusion is going to be on the inside of my sketch lines. If I flip side, that puts the extrusion to the outside of the sketch line. Okay, but for the exercises we're doing now, I want it to be to the inside. And then you would okay that. Then I did a cut, basically, on my my center axis plane. I guess, what is that? The XY plane. And I just projected geometry of this plane, and this vertical edge, and then I cut that off at a slope. Now, to do the rip, here's one of those kind of weird little things here that I feel I need to show you. If you do the rip command, you do that, you rip and you select a surface that you want to rip, and then you choose a point where you want the rip to be at. If I choose the exterior surface and then rip through, it doesn't cut through this little piece right here because that's at an angle. So what I did is when I was doing the rip, and you choose rip face, and I chose the interior face because that's the highest point, okay? And then I just chose the center point of the base right down here. And we can leave the default the way it is there. And it will cut a groove in it, okay? And so there's my model. And this one will create a flat pattern, okay? And so there it is, but it takes into account the folds, the radius of the folds, the thickness of the material. So if you were to measure this and compare it to the one done in AutoCAD, the measurements are not going to be exactly the same. Okay, simply because we're dealing with thickness of material and the bend radius of these things. Okay, and so that's kind of where we are there. Now, we're going to get into these things later in the semester as far as folding tabs and things like that go. It's a lot more complicated in Inventor because you're creating the part just as if it were going to be manufactured. And so you can create flanges, but it always puts a bend on it into the radius. And so that's why we're not doing tops and bottoms on any of these developments, because it gets very complicated. Okay, so that's how that one is. That's how that one works. Okay, and we'll move on, do a few of these, and I'll show you another one that's a bit more complex. Okay.